believe it to be news and we act on it, the falsity of that really, you know, is still the problem, right? Whether the person had a good heart or a bad heart in doing it. And even that, what's bad intent? In our world, that's become very muddy because a lot of fake news is because there is a political point of view to push, but a lot of it is about profit. You know, the pressure on the media to remain profitable right now is so high. And it's that clicking, you know? Did they get your attention? Did you click? Did you go to the link and click? Did you share it? Those are dollars. And so profit now, even above ideology, can be a problem. And if you combine the two, you know, Katie bar the door.
There's a big difference between, I hate pickles, because she's representing the current, her making a mistake in a story, and a story being published that Hillary Clinton owns a pizza joint that they're abusing kids in.
That's true.
That's an intentional lie, and that's the kind of stuff that is not journalism, it is not news, it is just a made-up whole cloth lie. And they will correct whatever mistake they make in the paper, but that was never correct.
Can I pick up on that?
Sure.
Let me pick up on that. So
Sure.
Steve describes a classic piece of propaganda, fake news, whatever you want to call it, where I don't know where it originated, but there is this thing called Pizzagate where they claim that Hillary Clinton and whatever key numbers of the elite Democrats are running a child trafficking ring at pizza joints,
Right.
and a dude stormed into a pizza joint waving a gun.
He shot people.
He shot people. So, Dan, there's a classic quote, and I think it's Harry Truman. And the classic quote is that a lie can make its way around the world before the truth even gets its pants on. And that was made back when we're talking telegrams and newspapers. Now we're talking about literally I can get around the world with a text. Why is that? Why does a lie, how can a lie travel so much faster than the truth?
There's a few reasons, but one of the simplest reasons why is because it is much easier to tell a lie. It takes us much longer to refute a lie. It's the same thing that we run into when dealing with, although no one seems to, or we don't see as many television ads, political ads as we used to. You know, it's easy to throw a lie out, but it's going, you know, and I can do that in 30 seconds. It's going to take my opponent 3 minutes to review that.
Is that the case? When I say there's a child slavery ring in a pizza joint, does it take me 3 minutes to say no?
Well, no, it shouldn't, but the problem is also you've got these things being shared within very small networks that then grow. Because the people who start this have a very small network that then continues to grow within compatriots. And there's motivated reasoning to believe it. Because of something that we've seen a dramatic increase in the last, the last basically 20 years, really 30 if we want to get, of this idea of effective polarization.
Alissa, is there anything you want to add to that? Why is fake news so often seem true to people?
I think because lies, it goes back to fake news being effective because it reinforces beliefs that you already have. And so if you see something, you're like, this is wild, I can't believe you're running a child sex ring at a pizza place, then, I mean, you're like, wow, that's incredible, because it's not credible. And I think you're just more likely to share it because it's already something that you believe, it's outrageous enough that I think it impacts people easily, when oftentimes the truth is, can be very nuanced, complicated, and boring to explain.
Let me use a term that Dan just introduced. It's something, motivated reasoning. Motivated reasoning. So I am motivated to despise the Clintons. I am motivated to do that. So I'm just willing to swallow any crap that's said about them, no matter how outlandish it is. Is that how it works?
That's right. You're right. I mean, it's the crowd that yelling, lock her up at every rally, who accept this stuff without, they believe it without questioning any of it. So it's already claimed to maybe 30 or 40% of the people already believe that without even having to evidence.
Let me go back to somebody who's in the journal industry right now. Your job is parsing fact from fiction. How do you identify lies? How do you identify fake news?
Well, you have to go and follow up on primary sources. So,
By primary sources, what do you mean?
I mean the people who were actually involved with an incident being described, documents, it just goes down to whenever a lot of times we get tips about different things, and we do our due diligence and follow up on them, and that involves talking to the person who passed the tip along to us, talking to people who are involved with the tip. If it seems credible at that point, maybe we do some more research. I think it's just really important to always double check something. So if a source tells me, I heard this, someone told me this, and then I go to the other person, oftentimes they'll be like, no, they're like getting it way wrong. Actually, I said this thing in response to something else they said. And that just goes back to the truth is often just complicated and messy, and it's not as tantalizing as telling a one-sided opinion or a straight-out lie.
Nathan, this is the soup you swim in. How exactly do you give advice? Help me identify fake news. What recommendations would you make?
Well, I mean, there are many different ways that you can, you can identify fake news. One, it's so much harder now because, I guess, in the golden age of journalism, so to speak, it's not always just about who, what, when, where, why. There's so much window dressing and just things to dress it up. But you go back and you look at the actual source, where it came from.
When Alissa says primary sources, you get as close to the horse's mouth as
You get as close to the origin of where it came from as you possibly can, and then you look at if you're looking at it on terms of the scale of the actual source, where is it at on the scale on the spectrum between left and right, somewhere in between. You also look at objectivity. Are they looking at both sides of the issue, or is the source biased or predisposed to, or only taking one side of an issue? What was omitted? Are there links within the article that are going to take you to other reputable sources that you can look at? So can you confirm it? Can you verify it? Going back to who wrote it, who was the author? Were they someone that has a journalism degree, or someone who has expertise with that topic in question? So we're talking about politics here. Are they, a political reporter, or is it, somebody who just has a name on an article where there's no title or no credentials? And you have to go back and look at that. And a large part of it is critical thinking, because I think one of the things that adds to it is our confirmation bias. I mean, we're so caught up in...
I'm sorry, confirmation bias?
Yeah.
Can you define that?
Confirmation bias. We're so caught up in our ability to believe what we want to believe based on our already held preconceived notions of our own attitudes, how we were raised, our own beliefs, our own moral code. And that's something that's been formed over, since we were very young. And so we read these things, and the more realistic it sounds, the more our tendency is to want to believe it. And the other thing I think is technology. I always tell my students that technology can be used for a good thing, it can be used for good, it can also be used for not so good if we're talking about
Primarily bad.
Yeah.
Technology, primarily bad.
So I mean, the viral.
What brings us primarily
The
bad?
viral part of it is, someone looks at a video, and before you know it, everyone in the world has seen the video. And so there comes the challenge of having to separate fact and fiction.
Now, when we talk about this kind of stuff, the tendency for people like me and Steve, and we've already done it a couple times, is we bring up ridiculous examples of fake news that people somehow have believed. That's our tendency. But it's important to recognize there's lots of different shades to this rainbow. For instance, there was a classic meme that circulated around the time Donald Trump was just a candidate, and it was this picture of him with a quote. And And the quote said, if I were to run for president, I'd run as a Republican, because those people are idiots, they don't know fact and fiction. That was fake. That was not real. That was just devised. But that's something, I will say, less ridiculous than Hillary Clinton running a sex slave workshop. So, in your general opinion, how does fake news, propaganda, whatever term you want to use, how do lies affect legitimate news gathering?
Well, are you telling me?
Yeah.
It makes it harder. I mean, it's hard to get through all the bush and weeds to get to that nugget of truth that you want for your story. No journalist worth his soul or her soul wants to produce a fake story, a story that's even incorrect, even a misspelled name. You toss and turn all night if you misspelled somebody's name. So that is different from people like the National Enquirer saying Ted Cruz's dad was involved in the JFK assassination. There's a big difference there. And Steve is out here. Steve knows that too. We toss and turn. I remember I spelled somebody's name wrong in a jury, in a jury story one time, and I stayed up all night just worrying about that paper coming out, knowing that guy's name was wrong, and they're going to. What it does is ruins a reporter's credibility with his readers. That's the thing. You want to have credibility with these people so they can look at us. They don't have to honor us. They don't have to award us. But I just want them to buy the paper knowing that what they're going to read is correct and truthful. And we are guardians of, I know I'm getting a little dramatic here, but we are guardians of the truth. And if it's not us, then I don't know who it is. But the alternative is what are we going to do about it? I know I'm jumping ahead, but
It's good enough.
what are we going to do about it? Are we going to change the First Amendment so that it's not freedom of the press, or people don't have the right to free speech? We could have the government decide what goes on Twitter and what goes on Facebook. I don't think you want to get there. I'm even against Alex Jones being shut down. I think his voice should be heard. If the wacko's got to be heard just along with us, right?
Who invented the printing press? Who did that?
Gutenberg.
What's his name?
Johann Gutenberg.
I heard that he used the printing press to disseminate propaganda.
You did?
Yeah.
Sure. You're also friends of the
Anyways, Alissa, let me talk about something that Steve alluded to. You're a reporter. Does the existence of fake news and people being really aware of fake news affect how you report in any way? As a legitimate news gatherer, does that factor into your decision making when you're reporting and gathering facts?
So I interpreted the question slightly differently, which is, has it in any way maybe hampered my ability to work as I normally do? I don't think I have really changed my process of reporting, but I've only been a reporter for less than 3 years, which is the same amount of time that fake news has been a big thing. But what Steve was saying earlier about credibility is the most important thing to a reporter. If you're not credible with people, why would they talk to you to share their stories with you? If you're not credible with your readers, why would they spend money and pay to read things that you write? And then I think another way that fake news could possibly hinder reporters' experiences is just the constant attack of the media is the enemy of the people, right? It creates a lot of hostility, and I was trying to think before I came here tonight if I've ever been called fake news before, and I think I have, not directly to my face, but there was a candidate for a local office at one point.
He told you reported fake news?
This person,
Yeah.
yes,
Huh.
yes, but
Don't know why I assumed it was a he. Was that in fact a he? You don't have to answer.
This
So-
person.
Yeah. So people, go ahead.
Yeah, but I think, reporters, one thing that's more on my mind now, because the hostility factor is, how do I keep myself safe, if I'm reporting in a place that maybe believes that the media is out to get you, out to spread lies. And I to say whether some of the increased heated rhetoric over like the media being the enemy of the people contributed to that attack. I think it's I think it's probably.
Stephanie, do you want to take the floor for a minute?
I will. All right, we have Trump's again. Woo! All right, so great discussion happening. Lots and lots about defining fake news. So, same process, get out your phone, open your text messaging app, open a new message, same number in 92, box 37607. Next question. How much of the news is fake? 0 to 25%, 45 to 50, 75, 26 to 100. How much of the news is fake? Fake.
In line with this, Rose, there was a Gallup poll a few months back said that 45% of Americans trust mass media. It was at 70% in the 1970s, about 50 years ago. Why is this? Is fake news responsible?
Not entirely. I mean, you have to keep in mind that mass media today means so much more than what mass media meant in the 1970s. And in terms of all those, folks out there working in mass media, before I leave here with, egg on my face, I want to be clear that I wasn't saying that just because someone reporting in the mass media makes a mistake, that they're evil or that their culpability is the same as someone who intends to mislead you, because I don't think it is. But again, we as the readers, the listeners, the watchers, have to be astute. We have to be discerning. And I think that our sense of trust has changed. What we believe, what we trust, is different than what we believe, what we trusted in the 1970s.
What's your answer, Dan? 0 to 25, 26 to 50. If you had to go somewhere, where would you go?
As to the level of
Yeah.
inaccurate news?
Yeah.
Depends on my news source. I mean,
Okay.
if I'm talking about what I would consider to be the press, the legitimate press,
Why don't we go?
0 to 25. But if I'm talking about what would be the partisan press or what's on someone's Facebook feed, I'd probably pick one of the higher percentages. I mean, it depends on the source. And I think, yeah.
Go ahead. 25%, Nathan. 25%. I'm sorry, I'm not answering. What I meant to say was, that's the math. 70% of Americans trust mass media in the 1970s. It's dropped 25%. It's 45% in the most recent poll. Why the drop? Fake news, right? We're wrong.
Well, I think, quite a bit of it, for me, involves looking at the trends of where are you getting your information, where are you getting your news from? Because we can get our news from so many different sources today. From the internet, television, radio. There was a time where we could only get it, from a newspaper or from a magazine, and that is something that limited the scope of where people were getting their news, and now you're getting your news from all sorts of different angles. I read an article the other day that said the analogy back in the days before the internet, you could go to a newsstand, and there was a newsstand filled with magazines and newspapers, and you could literally see on the outside